The smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread filled the air as we sat around my mother's dining table. Sunday dinners at her house had always been a tradition, even though I often felt out of place sitting there. My 6-year-old daughter, Maya, was squeezed happily between me and her grandmother. She loved the way Grandma always gave her attention, slipping her little treats and whispering secrets like they were best friends. The table buzzed with the usual noise, my brothers talking over each other, my sister laughing too loudly, my mother correcting everyone's manners. I was cutting Maya's chicken into small bites when her small voice rose above the chatter. "Grandma," she said brightly, "can I have some of your special candy?" The words were simple, but the effect was strange. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't happen by accident. Knives stopped scraping against plates. My sister froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Even my mother's face stiffened for just a moment before she forced a smile. I looked around, confused. "What candy?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Maya swung her little legs under the table and leaned closer to her grandmother. "The candy you give me when Mommy isn't looking. The ones that make me feel sleepy." My chest tightened. The air suddenly felt heavy. My brothers looked down at their plates, pretending not to hear. My sister cleared her throat and took a sip of water. My mother reached over and patted Maya's hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, sweetie," she said softly. "We'll talk about that later." "Later?" My stomach twisted. What kind of candy made my daughter feel sleepy? I turned to my mother, searching her face for answers, but she avoided my eyes. "Mom," I said slowly, "what is she talking about?" "Nothing you need to worry about," she answered quickly, picking up her wine glass. Her voice was light, but her hand trembled just enough for me to notice. I pressed my lips together, heat rising in my chest. Everyone else went back to eating, forcing conversation about work and school, pretending nothing had happened. But I couldn't unhear Maya's words. I couldn't ignore the way the room had gone still, like they all knew something I didn't. I glanced at my daughter, who was happily dipping bread into her soup, unaware of the storm that had just been planted inside me. Then I looked at my mother, who smiled as if everything was perfectly normal. But her eyes gave her away. They were sharp, guarded, almost daring me to ask again. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a long time, and Maya's innocent question had just pulled the first thread loose. "My name is Rachel. I'm 32 years old, and most days I feel older than that. Life has a way of carving lines into you, even when you're still young. I never thought I'd end up raising a child on my own, but here I am, trying to give my daughter a safe and steady life. Maya is 6. She's the kind of child who notices everything. Too observant for her age, people always tell me. She asks questions I sometimes don't know how to answer, and she has this way of tilting her head and studying faces like she can read what's hiding behind words. It scares me a little, but it also makes me proud. She's sweet, innocent, and yet far too sharp to be fooled. My mother, Evelyn, has always had a strong grip on everyone in the family. She's the type of woman who fills every room she walks into, not because she's loud, but because her presence demands attention. She raised us to believe that she knew best about everything, what to wear, what to say, who to love, how to live. Growing up, it was easier to follow her rules than to fight back. For me, though, it was different. I could never bend enough to fit into the mold she wanted. I was the middle child, the one who always questioned her decisions, the one she said was too sensitive. I left home when I was 20, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't breathe under her roof anymore. Her words could cut sharper than knives, and after years of being told I was a disappointment, I had to get away. Life outside wasn't easy. I fell in love young, thinking I had finally found someone who saw me for who I was. For a while, I believed in that dream. But the man I trusted walked away before Maya was even born. He said he wasn't ready, and that was the end of it. I raised her alone, working late shifts, moving from one small apartment to another, barely making rent some months. There were nights I cried quietly in the kitchen, wondering how I'd keep going. But then I'd see Maya's tiny hand wrapped around mine, and it gave me just enough strength to push through another day. All that time, I stayed away from my mother. We spoke only when necessary, short calls on birthdays, polite questions about health and work. She never liked the choices I made. She told me once that being a single mother was a burden I had chosen, as if I had ruined my life on purpose. Still, when she invited me to Sunday dinners, I went for Maya's sake. I wanted my daughter to know her family, even if my own relationship with them was cracked. My siblings, on the other hand, still live in my mother's orbit. My older brother Mark practically worships her, always praising her wisdom. My younger sister Anna can't make a decision without running it by Mom first. They see her flaws but refuse to admit them. In their eyes, she sacrificed everything to raise us, and she deserves loyalty. Maybe they're right, or maybe they're too scared to think differently. For me, every visit to her house feels like walking into old wounds. The way she looks at me, the The sharp edge in her voice when she corrects how I parent Maya, the comparisons she makes to Anna's perfect marriage or Mark's career. It all reminds me of why I left in the first place. I try to shrug it off, to keep my head down, but it stings every time. Still, I'm not the same girl who ran out of this house 12 years ago. I've built a life, even if it's not the kind my mother would respect. I've learned how to protect myself, how to keep walls around my heart. But when it comes to Maya, those walls aren't enough. I can take my mother's criticism, but the idea of her reaching into my daughter's world with her controlling ways, it terrifies me. That night at dinner, when Maya asked for the special candy, I felt every part of my body tense. It wasn't just about sweets. It was about trust, about my child, about the years I had spent trying to shield her from the very things that once broke me. My mother's influence had already taken so much from me. I couldn't let it creep into Maya's life too. And yet, part of me wondered if I was strong enough to fight her. Because Evelyn wasn't just my mother. She was the center of the family, the one everyone defended, the one who always came out looking blameless. Facing her meant standing alone. But for Maya, I knew I'd have to. I couldn't sleep that night after Sunday dinner. Maya was curled up beside me in bed, breathing softly, her little arm resting on my chest. My mind kept replaying her words over and over. Special candy, the ones that make me sleepy. The next morning, when I got her ready for school, I asked gently, "Sweetheart, what did you mean about Grandma's candy?" Maya looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. "The tiny white ones in the little bottle. Grandma says they help me relax when I'm too excited. She gives them to me when you go to the kitchen, or when you're not paying attention." My blood ran cold. "Do you know how many times she gave them to you?" I whispered. She shrugged. "A few times. They taste funny, but Grandma says it's our secret. She said not to tell you, because you'd just worry too much." A secret. My mother had been slipping pills to my 6-year-old daughter and telling her to keep it from me. My hands shook as I tied Maya's shoelaces. I smiled for her sake, but inside I felt sick. As soon as I dropped her off at school, I drove straight to my mother's house. My heart pounded the whole way. When she opened the door, she looked surprised to see me so early. "Rachel," she said, pulling her robe tighter. "What are you doing here?" I pushed past her into the kitchen. "What have you been giving my daughter?" Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play games with me," I snapped. "Maya told me about your special candy. Show me." For a moment, she looked at me with that cold, steady gaze she'd perfected over the years, the one that made me feel like a child again. Then she sighed and walked over to the cabinet above the stove. She pulled down a small orange prescription bottle. I snatched it from her hand and read the label. It was a sedative, strong enough to knock an adult out. My throat tightened. "You've been giving this to a 6-year-old?" My voice broke with disbelief. She lifted her chin. "Only a tiny bit, and not often. She gets worked up sometimes, Rachel. You let her run wild, always asking questions, never sitting still. I just wanted to calm her down. I was helping you. Helping me." I nearly shouted. "You drugged my child and told her to keep it a secret. Do you have any idea what this could do to her body?" To her mind. Her expression didn't change. "You're overreacting. I raised 3 children. I know what I'm doing. You've always been dramatic, Rachel. You think the world is falling apart over nothing." I felt the old sting of her words, the way she'd dismissed me all my life. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Maya. "You don't get to decide what's best for my daughter," I said through clenched teeth. "You don't get to slip her pills like she's some experiment. She's my child. Not yours. She's my granddaughter." My mother shot back. "And unlike you, I actually know how to handle children. Do you want her growing up as scattered as you were? Running from home, making foolish choices, ending up a single mother?" Her words landed like blows. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The resentment I had buried for years rushed to the surface. Every insult, every dismissal, every time she told me I wasn't enough. I looked at the bottle still clutched in my hand, and then at her face, so calm, so sure of herself. My stomach churned with rage and fear. "If you ever give Maya anything again without my permission," I said slowly, my voice shaking, "I swear you'll never see her again." Her eyes flashed, but she said nothing. The silence between us was heavy, filled with years of unsaid words. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole body trembled. I felt betrayed, violated, and terrified. My own mother had crossed a line I could never forgive. And I knew this was only the beginning, because if she could justify giving Maya pills, what else had she hidden all these years? That thought chilled me more than anything else. I avoided my mother for a few days after finding the pills. I needed space to calm down, but the anger never left. Every time I looked at Maya's face, I felt a wave of fear. What if something had gone wrong? What if those pills had hurt her? The thought kept me awake at night. By Thursday, my phone started buzzing with messages from my sister Anna. "Mom says you stormed out the other day. What's going on?" Then another. "You're upsetting her, Rachel. She's too old for this kind of stress. I didn't reply. But by Sunday, I knew I had to face the rest of the family. If I didn't speak up, my mother would twist the story, and I'd be the villain again. That afternoon, I walked into her house with Maya by my side. My brothers and sister were already there, gathered in the living room. The smell of roast beef filled the air, but my stomach turned at the thought of eating. Mom sat in her chair like a queen on her throne. She smiled at Maya, opening her arms. "There's my sweet girl." Maya hesitated and looked at me first. I gave her a small nod, but my heart ached. Even at 6, she could sense the tension. I sat down on the couch and placed the pill bottle on the coffee table. The sound of it hitting the wood made everyone look up. Mark frowned. "What's this?" "That," I said, my voice tight, "is what Mom has been giving to Maya, without my permission." The room went still. Anna gasped. Mark shook his head in disbelief. "Rachel, what are you talking about?" Anna asked quickly. I looked straight at my mother. "Do you want to tell them, or should I?" She lifted her chin, her voice calm. "I gave Maya something to help her relax. Nothing harmful. You always exaggerate." "Relax," I repeated, my voice rising. "She's a child, not a patient. You had no right." Mark leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Come on, Rachel. You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom's raised 3 kids. We turned out fine." I laughed bitterly. Did we? Or did we just learn to keep quiet, so we wouldn't be torn apart by her words? "Rachel," Mom said firmly, "I won't have you disrespecting me in my own house." I stood up, trembling. "You disrespected me first. You've been undermining me as a mother since the day Maya was born, telling me how to feed her, how to dress her, how to discipline her. And now this? Slipping her pills in secret? That's not love. That's control." Anna rushed to Mom's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "She didn't mean any harm. You're overreacting, like always. Why do you have to make everything so dramatic?" My throat tightened. The old story was playing out again, me standing alone, my siblings circling around her like bodyguards. "Do you remember when I was 16, I said, my voice shaking, "and I begged to go to that school trip? You told everyone we couldn't afford it, but I found out later Dad had given you the money. You just didn't want me to go." Mom's face hardened. "That's not true." "It is true," I shot back. "I saw the check. You lied to keep me under your thumb, just like you lied about so many things." Mark groaned. "Not this again. You never let the past go, Rachel." I turned on him. "The past is the reason I left home at 20 with nothing but a bag of clothes. The past is the reason I'm standing here now, still fighting for the right to live my life without her hands pulling the string." Mom's eyes flashed. "You left because you couldn't handle responsibility. You always blamed me for your failures." "No," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. "I left because you broke me down until I didn't know who I was anymore." Silence filled the room. For once, my siblings didn't know what to say. Then Anna spoke softly. "Rachel, Mom has done so much for us. She sacrificed her life for this family. Can't you just forgive her?" I shook my head. Sacrifice doesn't excuse manipulation. Love doesn't mean control. She crossed a line when she dragged Maya into this, and I won't stay silent. Mom's lips pressed together in a thin line. She looked at me with that same cold stare I remembered from childhood, the one that always made me back down. But this time I didn't flinch. "I will protect my daughter," I said firmly, "even if it means protecting her from—" The words hung heavy in the air. My siblings shifted uncomfortably, torn between their loyalty to her and the truth they didn't want to face. I picked up the pill bottle from the table and slipped it back into my purse. Maya tugged at my sleeve, her big eyes watching everything. I bent down and kissed the top of her head. "We're leaving," I whispered. As I led her to the door, my mother called after me. "If you walk out now, Rachel, don't expect this family to stand with you." I paused at the doorway, my back still turned. "They've never stood with me," I said softly. Then I walked out, my daughter's small hand clutched tightly in mine. But as much as I wanted to believe I was done with her, deep down I knew this wasn't over. Because secrets don't stay buried. The following Sunday, I told myself I wouldn't go back. I told myself I was done. But when Mark called, insisting that I come for dinner so we can talk like a family, I agreed. Maybe some part of me wanted closure. Maybe I was tired of carrying the weight alone. Maya stayed home with a friend's mom. I wasn't about to put her through another night of tension. I drove to my mother's house with my stomach in knots, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. The moment I walked in, I could feel the heaviness in the air. Everyone was already seated at the table, Mom at the head, Mark and Anna on either side, and my younger brother Daniel, who had flown in from out of town. Plates of food were laid out untouched. "Rachel," Mom said smoothly, "thank you for coming. Let's eat first, then we'll talk." I sat down but didn't touch the food. My appetite was gone. The clinking of cutlery was the only sound for a while. Finally, Mark put his fork down and turned to me. "You owe Mom an apology," he said. "You embarrassed her in front of us, made it sound like she was poisoning your kid." I stared at him, stunned. She gave prescription pills to a 6-year-old Mark. That's not nothing. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. Maybe she made a mistake. But Mom has always had our best interests at heart. You know that. I laughed bitterly. Do I? Because from where I'm standing, all I see is a woman who's been controlling us our whole lives. And you're all too scared to admit it. Mom slammed her fork down, her voice sharp. That's enough, Rachel. I will not sit here and be disrespected in my own home. The old fear rose in me, the same fear I'd carried since childhood. But this time I pushed past it. I looked around the table, at my siblings who were so quick to defend her, and I knew the truth had to come out. There's something you don't know, I said quietly. The table stilled. All eyes turned to me. When I was 15, I continued, my voice shaking, I found out Dad was seeing another woman. I heard them fighting in the kitchen one night, and I couldn't sleep. The next day, I asked Mom about it. Do you remember what you told me, Mom? Her face went pale, but she stayed silent. You told me I was imagining things. That Dad was faithful, but I wasn't imagining it. A week later, I saw the woman myself. She came to the house, crying on the porch. She wanted to tell Dad she was pregnant. And do you know what Mom did? Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? She handed her an envelope full of cash. I said, my hands trembling. Hush money. To make her disappear. To protect her reputation. And she looked that woman in the eye and said, if you care about your child, you'll take this and leave. Anna gasped. Mark shook his head. That's ridiculous. Mom would never. It's true. I snapped. I saw it with my own eyes. And after that, nothing was the same. Mom kept pretending everything was fine, but she turned all her anger on me. Every mistake I made, every time I stepped out of line, she punished me harder. Because I knew the truth. Because I had seen her weakness. The room was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass, but she didn't speak. Anna's voice broke the silence. Mom, is this true? Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes were glossy, filled with a mixture of anger and fear. Daniel leaned forward. Mom. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and shaky. I did what I had to do. Your father made a mistake, but I wasn't going to let some woman ruin our family. I was protecting us. Protecting us? I repeated, my chest tight. You weren't protecting us, you were protecting yourself. You cared more about appearances than about the truth. And I paid the price for it. I carried your secret, and you punished me for knowing. Mark pushed back his chair, his face red. You're twisting this, Rachel. Dad's mistakes don't change what Mom sacrificed for us. I looked at him with tears in my eyes. Don't you see? This is the pattern. She hides things, manipulates the truth, and makes us believe it's for our own good. That's what she did with me. That's what she's doing with Maya. And you're all too blind to see it. Anna shook her head slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Daniel just sat in silence, staring at our mother like he was seeing her for the first time. Mom finally broke down, her shoulders shaking as she covered her face with her hand. For the first time in my life, I saw her look small, fragile, human. But even in that moment, she wouldn't admit it fully. I did what I had to do, she repeated through her tears. You'll never understand. I swallowed hard, my whole body trembling. No, Mom. I do understand. I understand that you'll never take responsibility. And that's why I can't trust you anymore. The family was shattered around that table. Anna tried to comfort Mom. Mark kept shaking his head in denial, and Daniel just sat in stunned silence. But I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same. I stood up, my voice breaking. I won't let you hurt Maya the way you hurt me. This ends now. And with that, I walked out, leaving the house behind me. The air outside felt heavy but clean, like a storm had just passed. For the first time, I felt the weight lifting from my chest. But I also knew that storms The days after that dinner felt strange, like I was walking through the ruins of something that had finally collapsed. My phone buzzed constantly, missed calls from Anna, long messages from Mark, even a short text from Daniel that simply said, I don't know what to think anymore. I didn't reply to any of them. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Instead, I poured all my energy into Maya. I picked her up early from school one day and took her to the park. We ate ice cream, played on the swings, and laughed until the sun went down. As I watched her run with her hair flying in the wind, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. At night, when she was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about my mother. For so long, I had carried the burden of her approval, always wanting her to see me, to be proud of me. I had lived in her shadow, even after leaving home. But now, I finally saw things clearly. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need her control. I didn't need her at all. A week later, Anna showed up at my apartment. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. She sat on my couch and twisted her hands in her lap. Rachel, she said softly, Mom isn't herself. She barely eats, she barely talks. Mark says it's your fault she's like this. I sighed. It's not my fault. It's the truth catching up to her. Anna's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to handle this. I feel like the family is breaking apart. I reached over and held her hand. Maybe it is. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's the only way we can build something real instead of pretending. She shook her head. I can't turn my back on her. I'm not asking you to, I said gently. I just can't let her near Maya again. Not after everything. I need to protect my daughter, even if it means standing alone. Anna cried quietly, but she didn't argue. She left soon after, and I knew she would return to Mom's side. But I also knew something had shifted. She had heard the truth, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't unhear it. As for me, I started to rebuild in small ways. I enrolled Maya in a dance class she had been begging to join. I rearranged the apartment, making it brighter, lighter. I found myself smiling more, not because life was suddenly easy, but because I felt stronger inside. One evening, Maya climbed into my lap with her favorite book. After reading, she looked up at me with her big eyes. "Mommy," she asked softly, "are you happy now?" The question caught me off guard. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "For the first time in a very long time, yes. I am." It wasn't the kind of happiness that comes from everything being perfect. It was the kind that comes from finally letting go, from choosing myself, from choosing my daughter. I knew there would be more fallout, more difficult conversations, more tension with my sibling. But I also knew that I had taken the first real step toward freedom. And as I held Maya close that night, I realized something simple. That night, after a warm bath and a bedtime story, I tucked Maya into bed. She held her stuffed bunny close and looked at me with those big, searching eyes. "Mommy," she asked softly, "are we not going to Grandma's house anymore?" I sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair away from her face. "Not as often, sweetheart," I said gently. "Grandma made some choices that weren't safe for you, and it's my job to protect you." Maya frowned a little, thinking it over. "But, will you be okay, Mommy? You looked sad at dinner." Her question cut deep, but it also opened something in me. For years I had carried pain, fear, and resentment like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. And here was my daughter, small and innocent, asking if I was finally free of it. I felt tears sting my eyes, but this time they weren't only from sadness. I held her tiny hand and whispered, "For the first time in a very long time, I think I am." Maya smiled, her eyes slowly closing as sleep pulled her in. I kissed her forehead and whispered goodnight. As I turned off the light and stepped out of her room, a strange calm washed over me. The silence of the house didn't feel empty, it felt peaceful. I realized I no longer needed my mother's approval, her presence, or her control to feel whole. I had my daughter. I had myself. And that was enough. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this emotional story. Imagine your little girl asking for Grandma's special candy and uncovering a family secret that changes everything. Sometimes betrayal hurts, but it also sets us free. If this touched you, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one. Bye!